Well. Let's see if all this is actually going to work again after a month off. See a few people popping into the chat. We'll get going in a moment. Obviously, if you've seen the tweet, you've seen it on Facebook, make sure you share bits. Let's get folk in. Get rocking and rolling before too long. That seems as good a place as any to do that. Let's get rid of that, get rid of that. We're just going to let bits and pieces calm themselves down. There we go. We mute that. We hit that button. We pray it all works. Hey, there we go. There we go. Well, ladies and gents, it has been a while. It's been a minute. Been a hot minute. But here we go. I think it's probably the thing to say. I've got to put my head in the way of the fact that the sun is now coming through. The really annoying thing, and bless my neighbour, she's basically slowly just kind of redoing everything in her garden. But she cut down all the trees in her garden, and they just provided just a lovely amount of shade, which is now gone, of course, because it's gone, because she cut them all down. Most first world problem ever. Oh no, my house owning bits and pieces are not quite going how I wanted to. Just checking the football score there, which looks like that's finished the way I thought it was going to do. Either way, warm-up questions there in the chat. Who's been the most surprising signing? Because I think that's probably come in the last day or so for me. But folks slowly making their way in. Like I say, make sure to share things out, share the links, bits and pieces like that. Because for whatever reason, the algorithm, of course, just is the algorithm, and it's just a pain in the bum sometimes. Just making sure it's all shared out, and then we'll get rocking and rolling. Because, of course, going to be very freeform. Going to be very, very freeform. Because there's obviously a few bits and pieces. But we've got some stuff to talk about, obviously. That call's gone there. Right. Let's see how much hay fever plays up, and let's see if I can remember how to do this. Guys, gals, and the gender fluid, and all beyond the binary. It is Wednesday night, it is 8 PM, and welcome back to this off-season special for the BOTW What's Current stream. Bringing you everything from the weird, wonderful, and wacky world that is the National Ice Hockey League structure here in Great Britain. We focus on the National Division. That is our bread and butter. That is our home port. But of course, we are here to go through absolutely anything and everything from the National, as well as Division 1 and Division 2 in the north and in the south. And of course, big news coming out of the south today, actually, all things considered. Division 1, in fact, we've learned in the last half an hour that there is a new head coach of the Oxford City Stars. Came out a couple of days ago that Shannon Taylor, who stepped in midway through last season, left the club. He has gone elsewhere, although there's some very strong rumours as to where he has gone. But the new man behind the bench at the Ox Pens is Mark Saunders, former coach of the Chelmsford Chieftains. He, of course, took over during 22-23, was released in January of 2023, spent last season behind the bench for the Streatham Blackhawks in Division 2 South, and has now returned to South 1 as the coach of the Oxford City Stars. Been a bit of a strange one, all things considered, in Oxford, but there's a few more bits and pieces we need to talk about, but that's the big headline piece of news. But of course, we need to give you the little bits of housekeeping as we go, as we usually do. BannersOnTheWall.wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to the NHL National Division, and of course, it's the off season. We're working on some bits and pieces, don't you worry. Don't you worry, the wheels are turning on some pieces to go on the website over the course of the summer. But you've got all the great content from the last year, from our Banners on the Road series. All the games I went into that, as well as our Hockey Story series, our long-form content series. There's audio interviews, written-up interviews, pieces as well. You've got either side of the Great Divide, which is the feature-length piece I did, kind of looking at the Division 1 title game at Coventry. Some great stuff there from JJ Pitchley from Streatham and the captain of the Billingham Stars, Michael Elder. But you've got 13 years worth of content over at bannersonthewall.wordpress.com to read about. And of course, for all the bits and pieces, we are live. It's YouTube on a Wednesday night. Usually during the season, we're here every week. During the off-season, we just scale it back a bit, let everybody have a bit of a chill, bit of a rest, and we are here once a month, last week of the month, through the holiday period for us, until eventually the season starts and we get rolling all over again. But it is our May off-season special tonight, and if you need to catch up with anything else BOTW, you're live on YouTube. The links are in the description down below, as well as the link to our page at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. If you like what you see, if you want to help contribute to the upkeep and the running, then you can donate via there as well. But all the links are down there below. And the great bit about YouTube, of course, is we are live. So you've got the chat. It's over there on the right-hand side for most of you people as you're looking at it. Or if you're on your phones, it's down below. All that we say is, questions, comments, thoughts, feelings, anything that comes up that you think about as we're chatting through all the news over the next hour or so. By all means, chuck it in. We'll have a chat about everything. All you have to do is please remember the golden rule here at BOTW. DBAD, don't be a dick. Be respectful of other people's thoughts and feelings, and we are going to have a jolly good time. He says, with my hay fever playing up. Let's not talk as signing, says Colin. Don't you worry, we're going to talk about your mob at some stage as well. But like I say, that's the big piece of news at the top of the hour, is that we have our new coach in Oxford. Now, Mark Saunders, vastly experienced guy in that sort of South One level, all things considered. He's went through the time at the ENL, very heavily involved in Bracknell before, heavily involved with what became is now the Romford Buccaneers. In the past, and then, like I say, took over in Chelmsford, and for whatever reason it just didn't work, it just didn't click, and it's worked better under Lewis Clifford than it has. And Mark Saunders, like I say, sort of had a bit of a rebuilding year for himself in South London with the South 2 side there, the Blackhawks, now given another opportunity in South 1. Now with Shannon Taylor going, I think as well, a big question for people will have been, like, what's going on at Oxford, because there hasn't been a massive amount of news, all things considered. Certainly been very little on the signings front. Shane Moore, of course, who was very heavily involved last year as general manager, sort of has kind of stepped back, it seems, and disappeared, though there's been no official word as to what his status is with the City Stars at the moment. We then had Shannon Taylor, of course, he took over from Simon Anderson mid-season. Shannon Taylor saying he was stepping away due to life commitments. And the other bit of news that we'd heard out of Oxford was the departure of James Pentecost, which wasn't a massive surprise. He'd left Chelmsford to go play for Oxford midway through the season because it was sort of better for his life, and now he's actually stepped down into South 2. Pentecost going and playing for the Peterborough Phantoms side in South 2, which Nathan Pollard's putting together a pretty tasty looking side there, all things considered, which is also going to be partially boosted by Luke Clark, the Harringay Huskies netminder. He's going to be dual registered between the Peterborough Phantoms National League side and the South 2 side, so he'll be backing up for Hayden Levine, who's the new netminder in Peterborough, as well as probably getting some game time here and there for Nathan Pollard's South 2 side. But with Oxford, we've not heard anything really, and the first big piece of news about somebody actually committing to the club for this year is the return of to coaching at Div 1 level of Mark Saunders. I think it's going to be, a lot of this will be kind of suck it and see for a lot of people. It does feel a little bit like things have been almost too quiet in Oxford, especially as well. And I know, and there's a team that we'll talk about in a minute where it's been a little bit quieter for even more obvious reasons that came out during the weekend. But obviously that's the news that's kind of come out of today that we definitely need to discuss. The other thing, of course, is really quite a sizable bit of news, all things considered, because we'll get to Romford in a minute, because there's a few bits to unpack about Romford, is news out of Slough, and that is that firstly, I mean, the Jets have just signed Alex Cole. That's weird. That's something I don't think any of us had on our bingo cards heading into this one, that the captain of the Solent Devils, who's been at the club for the better part of a decade and a half, would be not there anymore, and would have signed for the Jets of all places. All things considered there, which is just a bit of a strange one for me. I get why the Jets have done that though. Cole, massively experienced, 33 years old, long storied career, very experienced at this level. I mean, they kind of needed some veteran nous. And the thing is, of course, is like getting a guy who knows how to win. With all due respect to Alex, the Devils haven't won anything for a little while. Winning that South 2 title back in 2018, I want to say it was. And that's obviously a big change for him. And it's some veteran presence on the back end. But across the corridor from the hangar is the really big bit of news, is that the Bees IHC are officially now the Berkshire Bees. Now, he says, needing to blow his nose, because stupid hay fever is just the worst thing in the world, so sorry for that. But yes, so the Berkshire Bees, as we now have them, for people who are obviously not familiar or are quite newer fans, the Bees IHC, as they've been for the last couple of years, were, for many years, since the late 80s, based out of the Hive leisure facility in Bracknell. When that closed during the pandemic, the Bees were forced into moving, and they eventually managed to kind of pick up things at Slough, and they've been there ever since, but they've always been Bees IHC, and we now have this rebranding, this is sort of at the beginning, another new era beginning, as it were, where they have attached themselves into a local identity once again. Now, they were never, ever in a million years going to call themselves the Slough Bees, aside from the fact that they need to have some sort of working relationship with the Jets, who are in the rink, have been there for longer. The Bees needed to kind of ground themselves in their identity, in an identity. Calling yourself just the name of a club is hard to do, because especially in a country like Britain, where geographically sports teams are always kind of linked into your area, not having an area kind of in your name was always problematic for them. Berkshire is a great choice for a couple of really obvious reasons. Firstly, because it doesn't exclude that previous history from Bracknell. Bracknell's in the county. For those of you who've not seen it, I know that the Bees have put up on their social media the clip from BBC South Today, the local news down in this neck of the woods, and Graham Bauer, one of the directors, of course, talked about the fact that when they actually looked at it, that there are fans from across the county coming to Bees games further than they thought. And this is one of those things, actually, when teams sit down and do look at it, just the wide range of people who will come to games. We said this in Basingstoke for quite a long time as well. Basingstoke was a team for the town, and that's always been kind of true. But you always have people who came from quite a distance away. People came from, I was at Bison games from Southampton every week. People from Winchester, Reading, Salisbury, Poole. Like, people came from the south, and those in regions around Basingstoke. And I'm sure it's kind of the same in Swindon as well. I'm sure there's people from Cheltenham, Bath, Gloucester, who probably, will pop into games in like Bristol and Swindon as well. Like, the sport is so attractive that people will travel to get what they want. People will get there, will find their ways in, and they'll want to get involved, and that's kind of how that works. So Berkshire as a name is a great way for the Bees to kind of ground themselves in some local identity, whilst also keeping some identity as well. The other big thing for the Bees, of course, with this new name is their new logo, which I think is actually really, really nice. The jerseys, to me, look exactly the same as they always do. It's black and yellow. They're Bees colours. People keep telling me it's gold. It's yellow. And maybe that's the Bison fan in me just kind of coming out as, nah, it's just yellow. So let's not go into kind of too much on that. Interested to hear, though, what people think. I can see Jamie in the chat has said that he thinks that the kits and the badges look very smart as well for the Berkshire Bees. Obviously, as well, keeps them alphabetically at the top of the table, at least for the time being. But yeah, I mean, what do people think about? What do people think about the stuff in at the hangar? With the Bees now. With this name change, what do we think of the logo? What do we think of Mark Saunders now coaching in Oxford? That's certainly going to be an interesting one. And yeah, there's a few bits and pieces I can kind of see there because we obviously asked the question in the chat, the warm-up question, of course, that we try to stick in every week. Who was your most surprising signing? A few people, Jamie chirped in there. Jason Hewitt back to Hull, thought all bridges were burned. Ashley Tate as Berkshire's assistant coach. I'm less surprised by that myself, all things considered. I mean, it's possibly a little bit surprising that he ended up with the Bees, given his connection with the Bison. However, he does know players in that neck of the woods as a result, and there's guys there that will kind of, maybe who were a little bit on the fence about joining the Bees. Now Tate has joined the Bees. They'll go and do the same. There's a bunch of different reasons for it. I think really, if we're honest, there was only a few places that he was going to kind of pop up in the National League, all things considered. I don't think Ashley Tate would have been a serious contender for the Oxford job, for example. But Ashley Tate maybe going and being an Elite League assistant coach on the bench That could have been a possibility. Bristol as a bench coach, definitely a possibility. Although my understanding is that Bristol have a bench coach as yet to be announced. We wait for the Pitbulls to do that. But I like it as a move from Dom Gabai. Getting somebody with different perspectives, different contacts, and getting him involved with the team to kind of do some different things with the Bees. The Bees probably suffered a little bit at times from an attacking perspective, being a little bit too one-dimensional. And maybe Tate has some... One thing I think actually Tate is very good at is individual assignments for players is the one thing I've seen. He gives guys chances, he gives guys roles, and they generally, he's generally very good at getting guys to do those roles. Where I think that Tate as a coach kind of needs to develop a little bit. It's his overall kind of tactical nous as to how the kind of things work. But of course, remember that actually Tate has been playing for so long. He was in Dom Gabai's position once a few years ago as well. He's not been on the bench that long, and actually maybe there's that kind of idea of for Gabai looking into the future, having someone who can help that kind of transition of, look, this is what you're going to see, this is what I'm going to see, and actually if we can find a way to make this really work together, it'll make the Bees a much better outfit in general. And that will hopefully get the Bees that little bit of progression. Now for the Bees, making the playoffs was massive for them. Yes, the playoffs did not go the way they wanted to, of course, as well. I think we all kind of knew that the Bees were going to struggle in the postseason last year. And I think the way I described it and the way I heard others describe it as well, and they were right to do so, I think, was that the Bees had to find fifth gear to make the postseason, which meant that when they needed to dial it up a bit more, there was nowhere to go. Yeah, most road cars, they have 5 gears, right? 5 gears in reverse. And when you've hit fifth gear, you can't go up any other gears. Whereas those teams, especially in their group as well, when you think they're in a group with Leeds and Hull and Peterborough, talk about finding extra gears. Peterborough found an extra gear and a half, didn't they, to get their way through. But for the Bees, now this is about refining things. They've kind of started at the bottom, worked their way up a bit more. And when I interviewed Graham Bauer, a little while back, this is what he talked about, was making those improvements year on year on year. Oh, excuse me. But that's kind of what we've ended up with here with the Bees, is now that they've tried something for a little while, and they're now adjusting their approach as it goes. Very, very interesting stuff. A few other bits and pieces you can see there as well. Andrew Day joining us from Blackpool, where I assume he's on holiday. Alex Cole to Slough. Never thought I'd see the day he'd leave Solent. Adam Harding to Telford will be one of my 2 surprising signings. I'm not hugely surprised about... Adam Harding to Telford is a surprise. I don't think it's as surprising as some other bits and pieces. Now, with Sam Watkins out, and clearly with Jesse Sutton and Jaden Pegger not quite working out as well as I think they will have wanted to, I think once it became clear that Sutton wasn't coming back, there was going to be a centre opening. And Harding filling that gap is not a surprise, because Adam Harding, now he's fully fit. Bristol has been what it's been, and obviously he had a year out when he was hurt, getting himself sorted out there. But Harding being signed in this league to be a top 6 centreman is not a huge surprise. The fact he went to Telford is a little bit of a surprise, because I was kind of expecting him to kind of hang around. I was potentially thinking that he might have been an idea for the Bees, but that path between Cardiff and Telford is kind of well trodden, and like we just said, there's gaps down the middle. So I think that's certainly an interesting one. Well, that's Andrew stuck in the chat here as well. WNHL League champions. Queen Bees win the Elite. Swindon Top Cats win Division 1. 2 North won by the debut, the first season, of course, of the Caledonia Steel Queens. So congratulations to them for winning the title in their first season. And the Cardiff Comics take South 2. The playoff finals are this upcoming weekend in Sheffield, Friday 31st to Sunday the 2nd. I do believe as well the streaming package for the women's playoff weekend is a £5 for the weekend. So if you want some extra hockey this weekend, if you're not AIHL TV games, they'll all be on in the morning. So you've got plenty of time to watch some bits and pieces of the women's weekend. Should be cracking. Looking forward as well for the promotion relegation playoff between the Swindon Top Cats, who obviously won Division 1, and the team that finished bottom of the Elite League, Women's Elite League, which I believe, and Andrew will correct me if I'm wrong, is Streatham Storm. So Streatham Storm versus Swindon Top Cats. Winner plays Elite League is going to be fantastic. And of course, I was chatting on Twitter the other night, having watched the German promotion relegation playoff bits and pieces, wondering whether in the NIHL that would work between Division 1 and Division 2. And that might add a different perspective to playoffs, for example. But yeah, certainly some stuff to be looked at there. And like I say, if you want that hockey fix this weekend, the women's game, women's hockey is different from men's hockey. It's a different mentality. The lack of checking as a legal thing makes it different to watch. But I tell you what, there's some really, really good stuff. And trust me, that Queen Bee side is something to behold. They were absolutely watching them. I mean, Guildford Lightning, get some credit for trying, but they got absolutely stomped by the Queen Bees. And watching them in full flight was something else. It was amazing. It's going to be interesting to see who will stop the Queen Bees. And of course, the big answer will probably be the Solihull Vixens. The Solihull Vixens who've kind of kept pace with them pretty well for the entirety of the year. So yeah, this weekend, $5 for the weekend, not a $5 for a game. The weekend is a $5. Knock yourselves out. Should be tons of fun in that one. What else have I actually got in my notes? Because I wrote my notes this afternoon during my lunch break. And of course, 1,001 things have happened this evening, which is really good. Of course, we've got plenty of other signings that we want to just kind of chuck in. People want to chuck in as well. I can see someone has been put some bits and pieces there. Mitchell, big fan of the Sheffield Steel Dogs, I know. Steel Dogs announcing the signing of Nathan Ripley last Friday from the Coventry Blaze 2-way with the Steelers. Thought. I'm disappointed for Ripley in the sense that he couldn't get a full-time Elite League gig. When Ripley went from the Steel Dogs to the Blaze, I thought the Blaze did the sensible thing. They played Ripley, they signed Ripley having him played a role for the Steel Dogs, and then asked him to replicate that at the Blaze. And I thought it was fine. I didn't understand why he needed to go and play for the Lightning. I realised they kind of did that because they had injuries and they needed a body. And I'm not necessarily seeing the value. Maybe some MK fans will kind of explain this to me, what the additional value Nathan Ripley added to them was. So that's frustrating for him. But I think he gets to go back home. And the Steel Dogs are a club in transition. Like, they were a club in transition midway through the year. I criticised the Dogs for doing that midway through the season, because I think it was partially disrespectful to some of the veteran players on their team as a result. But where they can finally fully hit reset, what you want for the Steel Dogs is guys who have played at that level, but are able to kind of move about between the two. Now, for Ripley, if this is his way into the Steelers, whether you can like or dislike the Steelers as an organisation, I am definitely not the Sheffield Steelers' biggest fan. However, the Steelers are trying something here in terms of a development model. And one of the things, if they're particularly wanting the Dogs to be a young side, you can have a young side. We've seen this with Slough in Division 1. Having a young side is great, but when you don't have the nous in certain situations, you don't know what you don't know until you have to do it. And you can sink or swim. Sometimes you'll swim. But a lot of times you'll sink in hockey where you don't have the experience of performing in those situations. Very rarely do you hit lightning in the bottle. And Ripley's played Elite League. Ripley has the opportunity, now to be effectively an extra forward for the Steelers. He can rotate in. He'll probably train with the Steelers, let's be honest, as well. As will Finn Ulrich, who's gone there as well. And Ulrich, of course, very heavily impressed a lot of Steelers folk when he was up there playing with them. Ripley kind of gets to act as a bridge. He's a bridging player in that kind of literal sense. He knows what training with an Elite League team is like. He knows what operating with an Elite League team is like. And if they're bringing through these younger guys who've not had that experience of that, that operating up that professional level, then Ripley is going to be a really, really good guy to kind of take a few of these sort of potentially 16, 17, 18-year-olds under his wing and just go, here's how you behave, here's how you conduct yourself, here's what you need to do. And obviously Ben Morgan, of course, now the coach of the Dogs, is going to be doing some bits and pieces. You know, another great guy, great hockey brain on his shoulders, still a really good player at this level. He's there as that sort of veteran experience of teaching guys how to perform at the, you know, the NIHL level, getting them ready for where they are, and then we'll kind of look to push them on. Because the one thing we haven't quite seen is what that kind of, where's the Venn diagram going to kind of operate between the Steelers and the Steel Dogs in terms of kind of that player development. That's one thing they've not hugely talked about. They've talked about it, but it's been in very general terms. They haven't really kind of codified anything at all as to what it looks like. Now we know Ripley will be on a two-way, Ulrich will be on a two-way, and when the Dogs are not playing, you'd assume they'll try and find ways to get them into the lineup. If guys are hurt, they'll find ways to get guys into the lineup. What I'm interested to see is, do the Steelers treat this like a proper development affiliate in the same way like North American teams do? Or will it be more of a European model? I venture, knowing what Elite League teams are like, they will lean towards a North American style model, and that will be very interesting to see. But Ripley, like I say, it's a shame he hasn't got a full-time Elite League gig, but he's kind of got the best of both worlds here as a result. So he gets to go back home. He gets to be a Sheffield Steeler, which of course kids from Sheffield want to do. And I think that's just going to be interesting to play it out. This is the thing. Like I said, I maintain what I feel is a healthy amount of skepticism about Tony Smith's approach, because Tony Smith's words are what we have to go on, and his actions are what we have to go on. We have seen what has happened there with the Steelers as an organisation in terms of bringing British players through. However, this is something different, and this is something new, and it deserves its opportunity to fly or to fail on its own merit. So let's sit back and see. What I'm interested to see as well is, what is that support structure around Ben Morgan going to be like? Are we going to have a Steel Dogs general manager? My understanding is there's potentially something there. You know, what are his assistant coaches going to be like? What are his bench coaches going to be like? What's that structure around Morgan? Or is Morgan having to do an awful lot by himself? Because we will see. I assume this will all get announced in due time. Sheffield like to drip feed things out. If you really want to find out quick, join the WhatsApp group, I suppose, is there. As we talk about different models of bits and pieces, though, of course, we do need to look down into, was it South 1? Is it South 2? And then we also need to look up into North 2 as well, because there's two new teams on the horizon who've been signing players, or at least have been sort of trialling players. Up in the north, well, certainly North Wales, the D-side Ducks have made their appearance onto the grand stage. They are the D-side development side that the Dragons are looking to put into North 2. The logo has come out for the D-side Ducks. It looks really interesting. It's obviously the same colour scheme. I'm not quite sure how you go from a dragon to a duck, but it works, I suppose. You get the alliteration of the D-side Ducks, so great on that front. Not heard any signings out of them yet, and of course we've not heard. The league meetings and stuff are off a little way, but teams are obviously trying to get bits and pieces sorted out. But developmental model-wise, into Cardiff Bay, we hear out of the Cardiff Canucks and Trevor Hendricks, the first signings for this new side. Now, originally, all of their bits and pieces said that they were aiming for NIHL 1, and then very quietly, they changed all of their socials to say NIHL 2. We'll find out what's happening on that one, I'm sure, and yeah, I've been asking some questions that hopefully will be answered before too long. But we have the first signings for the Cardiff Canucks, and they are, well, Trevor Hendricks himself. The man is going to lead from the front or the back or whatever we're calling it there, but he has added himself to defence, and then a vastly experienced NIHL forward in the lower divisions, particularly in Division 2, Victor Langseth, who's based in Cardiff but has played for Bristol's Division 2 side for the last little while. So they've got one up front, one at the back as a means of starting themselves off. But they've also announced their educational development, one of the package, and one of the things that Trevor Hendricks had been talking about that he wanted to do was he wanted the Canucks to kind of be alongside in terms, trying to have these bits and pieces with an educational package and trying to kind of replicate that sort of North American style development pathway for young players. And of course, as a player who played Major Junior, he played hockey and did his education alongside it. And the Canucks have this deal with Cardiff and Vale College, obviously based down there in the South Wales area. So young players coming and playing in Cardiff to to do their bits and pieces. We'll be able to get an education alongside hockey. So what's that from Sigala? Canucks confirmed in one of their Facebook comment sections. This is not where you confirm things, by the way, folks. You confirm it in your press releases. They'll be playing Div 2. The Fire announced a handful of signings, but nothing about D2 or D1. We might get 2 Cardiff sides in D2. No issue for that. If there's the ice time there to do it, then why not? What I find interesting as well for the Cardiff Canucks is that on their social media they say they're in association with the Cardiff Junior Devils. What does that mean in terms of doing bits and pieces with in terms of doing bits with the Fire? I assume potentially, depending on how many people Hendricks can convince to play for them. They've obviously held trials as well, but they'll want to play those younger guys, and eventually a lot of it will be a pathway for those younger kids coming, those younger decent kids coming out of the Cardiff junior system. Certainly interesting, of course, with that Hendricks is the skills coach for the Cardiff Devils. So obviously, former NHL draft pick. He's played in Europe a fair bit. Played really randomly for Braun Lager in the German 3rd Division, which is a team that played my team quite a lot. But yeah, certainly if you're you've got kind of some options there. So if you're a Cardiff junior, or if you're a junior kind of in that South Wales, South West England area, you've got some options now. You can try Bristol Div 2. Swindon's Division 1 side, although we don't know what's happening with that. All we know is that Ken Forshey is in charge, but there's an opportunity there. You've got Trevor Hendricks now with the Cardiff Canucks in Cardiff Bay. You've got Mark Kirkcuddy and the Fire in whatever division they're going to be in next year. So if you're a young player kind of coming up, there's some options for where you kind of can play and stylistically develop yourself. It's going to be very, very interesting. Does the Fire turn into a more older players thing? Do we see lots of kind of turnover of players from the Canucks as they try to be the sort of youth development aspect? I don't know. Obviously remains to be seen. Trevor and I are trying to work out a time to sit down to do an interview. I think that's probably the best way to describe that at the moment. But if we get it, great. If we can make it work, we'll always make it work, because we obviously want to put these questions to the people who are making moves, moving and shaking in British hockey. What else have we got in the chat at the moment? £5 for 13 games. Good for a game Friday evening. And the Top Cats take on Streatham in the promotion battle. I think we can do this. We have Queen Bees and Guildford players after all. Yes, there's a lot of... This is one of the things, right? Going to women's hockey and learning all the sort of the weird eccentricities of bits and pieces like that was fascinating stuff. And firstly, the short shrift they seemed to get. Like, no ice cut between periods 1 and 2. What's that about? Like, this was elite. This was the top level of women's hockey in this country, and they got 1 ice cut, which is a bit mad. But yeah, that should be there. Is there something going on or gone behind the scenes at the Phantoms? An exodus of players on team who won a title isn't sitting right. Just my thought. There isn't anything going on behind the scenes at the Phantoms that I'm aware of. There's nothing it's not even one of those things that I can't report. There's just no chatter. They're just doing things. Guys move on. Weldon's retired. Sladkovsky's moving abroad. He's not even moving to another team. He's moving to America with his missus. And so like Tyler Delabatouche moving on, which if you've read the bits and pieces from Bristol, Tyler Delabatouche is going to be training in the week with the Cardiff Devils. He's on a two-way with an elite league side. If I had that opportunity and I was him, I'd have moved too. And Jordan Marr's gone back to Scotland. So it's probably not as... an exodus might be overstating the case. I can see Tom's kind of made the similar... Tom Graham has made the similar sort of thing there in the chat. It's not... An exodus is probably the wrong word. It feels a bit like the Phantoms are going to retool slightly. And obviously they have. The change from Jordan Marr in net to Hayden Levine is a pretty sizable change. Now, Savakula got back in the EPL days, was always a massive fan of his import netminders. It offers a different option up front, and particularly as well for the Phantoms where you've got a fair few younger guys coming through. This means a bigger role now for Foster, for Hunt. What does it mean for Connor Glossop if he returns? What does it mean for Matthew Seville coming up and coming through. Louis Kinniston coming up and coming through. Like, guys leaving is only a bad thing if you don't find a way to fill the hole. And actually with the Phantoms, where, they'd said in the past, they put up their ticket prices and said, our operating costs are going up, we need to raise prices. And actually, one of the ways to kind of offset some of those operating costs is to, if you've got good youngsters, trust the youngsters. Play them. Like Luke Clark is Peterborough based, and him coming back is very interesting. I know some people were, and I said to Luke myself, actually, when we had a very brief chat, that I was surprised he didn't go Div 1 myself, because if you didn't have the opportunity to watch Luke Clark last year for Haringey, like, Luke Clark's got a lot of potential. I think there's, how high his ceiling is, I don't necessarily know, but he has got the ability to play above Div 2, and the opportunity for him to kind of come home is big. It's obviously a big motivating factor, and he gets to work with a guy. And Levine has not played a massive amount of hockey in the last couple of years, but the pedigree the guy comes from is pretty substantial. Nobody plays for the University of Michigan by being rubbish. Like, let's be honest here. The ability to playing for the University of Michigan is pretty substantial. Like, playing American college hockey, people will put the NCAA below Major Junior, and I get why. But but also for the also all things considered, it's nothing to be sniffed at. This guy played 4 years at one of the top college programs in the country. Like, this is not a bad netminder by any stretch of the imagination, albeit maybe not one of the greatest netminders in the history of everything at Ann Arbor, but 67 games in 4 years for an NCAA college as a netminder, that's pretty substantial, all things considered. And obviously played a bit in the Elite League in 22-23, played for the Storm, played for the Steelers. Obviously did not play much last year, but the other thing with Levine, he's based in the UK now, is my understanding. More costs that are no longer an issue for the Phantoms. It's about being savvy, and like I say, I don't enjoy the hockey, but Slaver is a smart man when it comes to some of these bits and pieces. So you have to just kind of let him. You have to kind of let him weave his magic and kind of see what he comes up with. What we'll do, he says, just quickly skimming on his notes. Romford. Let's get to Romford then, shall we? Just because there's obviously a fair bit to kind of talk about here. And a lot has been said, and there's been a lot of press releases. And what we'll do, we'll kind of work our way backwards, as it were, because, of course, 25th of May, so relatively recently, where you've got John Scott's press release, where he steps back from hockey operations. But yeah, a lot of it, I think there's a chunk of stuff that kind of needs to kind of be taken into account here. That if John Scott is going, there are two parallel tracks here, for me, in my personal opinion. Because I don't know John Scott very well. We've had a few conversations very briefly. But ultimately, I can only kind of go on the evidence of my eyes. John Scott is responsible for keeping the Raiders alive for a really long period of time. And he stepped in on more than one occasion to kind of keep things going. When the rink at Run Valley Way shut and the Raiders ended up at Lee Valley, it was a thing that kind of needed to happen, because the rink obviously was going to go. The Raiders as a club needed to kind of find a way to keep going. Without John Scott, there is no Raiders that we have now. And we can call them the Romford Raiders again, which is the thing. His press releases is an interesting one. Not everyone will miss me, I'm sure, but I just ask all to consider whether they would have gladly committed 10 years or more spare time than they really had to a labour of love and no financial reward. So thanks to all that have supported me in whatever way they could whilst my name has been over the door. Management, players, coaches, bench staff, volunteers, equipment sponsors, commercial sponsors and you the fans. To my incredibly tolerant wife, I can last announce I am back. Now, I think that certainly that bit there about would people have willingly committed 10 years or more spare time. It feels like a bit of a poke back at some people who are who have not been happy with John's recent running of the Raiders. Now, like I say, without John Scott, the Raiders would not be alive. I think a lot of people can kind of sort of set themselves in that place. What I don't necessarily think is a bad thing is new direction and new leadership for the Raiders. Because it would, let's be honest as well, where John talks about the fact that he, in that press release that he put out, that he is in the process of selling the team. Now, I'm just trying to find the immediate bit in here. There, so yeah, I've been in discussions with a possible ownership group. This is put in inverted commas there. And I believe that these discussions will continue. They clearly need to be certain that running the team is also viable and the right thing to do as a business prospect, because few will undertake running a team simply for the love of the team. They will also need to know they have the backing and support of the backroom staff. They've mostly been with the team since 2009, some even before then. I'm sure they can rely upon you, and I suspect even more to join the operation team. I believe whilst announcing my stepping back with no firm owner in place could create problems, that advertising my departure now may also unearth another personal group that can take the club forward should another route be required. Now, for me, announcing that you're going before these negotiations were done is an interesting move for me. Now, what I can report at the moment is that these discussions are something that has been going on for some time. Because, like John has sort of alluded to there, some people are not happy with his running of the team. And a large chunk of that I can kind of get, particularly in the last season. 2023, the Romford Raiders managed to trip and fall and play really hard and fall their way into the playoff final. Make no mistake, they were the best team at the 2023 playoff finals. Leeds won it, but they only won it because the Raiders shot themselves in the foot in the first 5 minutes of that game. The Raiders were superb. But the Raiders didn't press on as an organisation from 2023 into 2024. They signed some great guys. There is no reason why a team that added 120 points of British scoring in 2 players shouldn't have done better than they did. But it seems like the organisation didn't press on. Where were the new sponsors? Where was the excitement? Where was the gusto kind of coming from bits and pieces from ownership to realise that they could push on should they choose to? And ultimately, sometimes things just tire out. Sometimes things run out of steam, and sometimes there has to be change. I don't think it's a bad thing if John Scott sells the team. He deserves to never have to pay to go into a Raiders game ever again. Without him, the club would be dead. Simple as that, quite straightforward. But also there has to be a time to go. You can't do everything forever. Sometimes it's a year, sometimes it's 100, sometimes it's 20, sometimes it's 10. It's been a while. And ultimately, the Raiders feel like they need a refresh. My personal feeling is the fact that the departure of Aaron Connolly and the departure of Sean Easton is symptomatic of kind of where the Raiders ended up. Because they didn't want to keep continuing on the same track that they were on. Now, obviously, there's probably a bunch of other factors into this as well. Sean Easton has busted his backside. He's GB under-18s head coach. There's a lot going on for him. Aaron Connolly, he's not getting any younger, and he's got a wife, and he's got a child, and ultimately he gets to go back to where it all began, and everybody in Victory is going to be really, really happy with Aaron Connolly, because boy, is Aaron Connolly going to have a field day in South 1. Also, Aaron Connolly and Dan Scott back on the same team. Hilarity is about to ensue. Enjoy that one, Gillingham. But it all feels a little... Whilst obviously there's lots of good PR and lots of nice words being said, especially you should say nice words about Aaron Connolly, He's one of the best players outside of the Elite League in the last decade. But it all feels a little bit, even I, the person who, tries not to be too conspiratorial, it kind of follows a pattern here. That guys moved on, that Easton moved on, that Connolly moved on because they felt they needed the change. And if the change wasn't going to come where they were, then they were going to be the change themselves and move on to do other things. For Romford, what can I confirm? I can confirm that there are negotiations in place for a takeover of the Raiders. John Scott is not making that up. That is a thing that is happening. Those discussions are ongoing. That's what I can report right now. That's what I can confirm through multiple sources. That's what I can put into the public sphere, that those discussions are ongoing. What happens with the Raiders? Well, the short version is that we are not going to hear anything in terms of player signings. We are not going to hear anything in terms of other bits and pieces until there is a confirmation that the new ownership group is taking over or that they are not. Will a new group emerge? I do not know. If it does, if it doesn't, I can confirm it. I will report it. If it doesn't, then I won't. Simple as that from a BOTW perspective. But there is a group that has actively for some time wanted to take over the Raiders. They are in active talks now to do so. We await that to happen. We wait to see what happens with that. For Raiders fans, just going to have to sit and wait, unfortunately. It's not as messy as the Sheffield situation from last year. Not yet, at any rate. But there's rubber on the road, but we're not at the destination yet. It's probably the best way to say that. What have we got in the deep breath? Yeah, well, don't blame me, Colin. What's that from Sigala? Caught me off guard when I started watching women's hockey. The assume this is 20 minutes, 5-minute break, sat on the ice with no ice cut, 20 minutes, 15-minute break in the locker room with an ice cut, 20 minutes. Yeah, it's weird. It's weird in women's hockey. I don't know why they don't get the extra. What's that from Mitchell? Edgar's Landsberg signs for Telford as well. In my opinion, Telford are building something big ahead of the 24-25. Rose Mitchell-King, Brad Day, Adam Harding, Finn Howes, Harry Ferguson. Landsberg's is an interesting signing, more because I'm not 100% sure how he's going to be used at Telford and who's not coming back as a result. But if you're without Sam Watkins, Landsberg's is a winger. He's not a centreman. Landsberg's, of course, started last year with the Bees, went to Bristol and then just kind of sort of stepped back because of life and bits and pieces like that. Landsberg's is now based in the Midlands. I believe he's based like Coventry way. So playing for Telford is a good option for him. It's not too far away. National Division club. And Landsberg's is not a bad player. Like, he's not world beating, but he's got a skill set. What I think is interesting is he's always been one of those players, and I think Telford fans will need to get used to this, because a lot of Telford guys are very direct, and Telford's style has always been very direct and kind of getting stuck in. But Landsberg's is kind of a guy who has a tendency to lurk on the periphery a little bit, and that's not a bad thing if you match him up with guys. If you match him up with the right guys who will do bits and pieces. Landsberg, though, deceptively quick, deceptively good shot, and reads the ice very well. What he's not is particularly physical. It's one of my bigger criticisms of his game for Eddie, is that he needs to be more physical. He needs to not be so worried about getting stuck in, and particularly as well, if you're going to be playing for a Tom Watkins side, you need to get physical into the game. Henry Adams is, he's gone. I thought he'd gone. Maybe I'm losing my marbles on that one. I'll get the top of this one. Sutton's gone to France already. Fair play. Landsberg's is a dual nat. He is British trained though. He is not an import spot. He is not an import spot, Landsberg's. He is British. He's British trained and British qualified as Eddie Landsberg. So he does not require an import slot for you. Interesting as well. The other thing I'm hearing is a reclassification for even Bjorkley Nordstrom. This has not been. This has been again confirmed in your comment section, Peterborough. But Bjorkley Nordstrom, who shouldn't have been an import in my brain beforehand, but from my understanding, and again, Peterborough put this out there, he's been reclassified as a Brit. which, given his 2 years of junior development, is what he should have been anyway. Perhaps an ITC-related thing, I don't know. But all things considered, Björkley Nordstrom now being British classified frees things up. Peterborough now have an import slot in net, but you've got a guy who is import calibre, because he was, is now British. So the ability to get some different import things in there is going to be interesting. What Peterborough do, I don't think with an import netminder Peterborough go import D. Telford I could see going import D. I think given some of their forward depth, I could see them going for an import D, potentially bringing Luca back, given you've got some good young British forwards in there as well. So yeah, it's there's a lot of permutations still kind of playing out. Barry McKenzie has barely signed anybody in Bristol yet, so there's a lot happening there. Swindon are going to sign all the same people, so that'll be interesting to see. As a Raiders fan since year one, this is not the first time I've been through this. I'm concerned about how many of our core team have already gone elsewhere. Time will tell. Well, again, circumstances will kind of dictate bits and pieces. Like Zach Milton. Is Zach Milton going to the Elite League, for example? Reclassified and never an import, and they just get quiet. They had an import slot available all year. It'd be very Peterborough to do that, wouldn't it, Tom? But yeah, time will tell with the Raiders. But there's a bunch of different things. Like the future of Brindley Caps, for example, is going to be a massive, massive talking point. There's a few bits and pieces flying around about him that are unconfirmed at this time. But of course, he is arguably, especially post GB18s, arguably the hottest young prospect in the country alongside Seb Moore. There's a lot happening still for Romford, a lot of moving pieces. But guys will want to play there. Guys will want to play for Romford, if nothing else because it's a good option for them. Where can you see Jay Warren ending up, leaving Bristol after the first year after a 2-year deal? I can't see a lot of National League options in the National League, unfortunately. I would not be surprised if Jay Warren ended up at Swindon's Div 1 side, potentially, if they really want to make a splash. For Warren, I mean, it's really hard to say because I'm not sure really where you put him. He's not going to drop into Div 2. I don't think he needs to do that. So Div 1 options. Oxford becomes an option, though I don't think he'll do that. Swindon Div 1 is an option. Swindon National is an option. Telford maybe is an outside bet. That could be an interesting one. But I think it's he has a skill set. It's just who wants to kind of make the best use of that skill set. But like you say, I'm struggling to think immediately where he pops up as well. Lightning have sold just under 1,100 season tickets. Cast my mind back to when I started watching Lightning hockey in 2009. Lightning were very happy to get that sort of crowd. Come on so much since the refurb. Well, yeah, and come on so much since your Elite League owners who were useless. Luca, Pekka rumoured to stay. Need a big D experienced player to build current players up. Day faces too many shots. Brad Day plays too much. Like the over reliance on Brad Day is mental. Like you need a guy. You need a guy to be able. If you're gonna have a backup, have him back him up, and that backup means play the kid. Like Matty backing them up last year was more than capable of taking minutes, and they just didn't. There was I'll try and find it actually from NHL stats because we were talking about some bits and pieces. Let's just have a look and see if we can find it. Only because he sent, obviously, there was some sort of statistics about netminding bits and pieces. Percentage of ice time played by starting netminders. Brad Day played 91.808%, so 91.08% of the minutes for Telford last year. This is way too high. Way too high. Like, British hockey needs to get past this idea of just leaning heavily into these bits and pieces. Just mad. I mean, like, you look at the difference here, and I don't necessarily know how. I assume from that Joe is dictator, the one who's the starter, was the one who's played the more time, because MK, of course, the stats are slightly skewed, of course, from an MK perspective, because Headley got hurt and Curlin played a lot of minutes. But if we look at this percentage of ice time played by starters, MK 54.4, Solway 58.72, so of course you had a lot of guys rotating there. Sheffield 65.5, Romford 65.8. Bristol 73.97, Bees 79.36, Swindon 84.55, Hull 84.6, Peterborough 86.6, Leeds 90.02, Telford 91.08. And yeah, that's that number is way too high. The thing they need to do for Brad Day, Matty Blore, get him on the ice, get Matty Blore on the ice. Yeah, Mike says there, Telford fan there. Blore had one full home game. It's not enough. Play the kid. Play the kid. Why have you signed him if you don't want to play him? I don't get this from coaches. I get that the league title is the big thing, but it's not. You can't lean so heavily into one guy anymore. It's not feasible. No respect the Warren whatsoever. In my opinion, he doesn't deserve to play in this league. He'll have a big target in his back next season, provided he signs with another team in this league. Yeah, there was some chatter towards the end of last year about some things said on the ice by Jay Warren that made him very unpopular in certain quarters. Hockey fans have long memories. Hockey coaches don't. If you've got a guy who can do the job, providing he's not like rob the boys in the dressing room or done too much, like the things hockey players get away with. If a coach thinks the guy's gonna win, then it's gonna be like that. Most net mining Euros have been signed already. Headley, Curlin in MK, and Zimostra, McLaughlin in Hull, the best Euros for me. For me, Zimostra, McLaughlin outdoes Headley and Curlin at this level for me. Mostly because I don't. For me, Zimostra and McLaughlin are better than Curlin in my personal opinion. That's nothing against Will Curlin. I just don't think he's as good a netminder as Dimitri Zimostra and Jordan McLaughlin. I think McLaughlin has got an unusually high ceiling that I don't think people will give him the credit for. Headley should probably be playing in the Elite League and isn't. Same as Gospel should be playing in the Elite League and isn't. McLaughlin's got potential though. I'm just trying to think who else we have, because the Bees don't actually have a netminder signed at the moment, do they? So it's a bit hard to tell. Fascinated to see who goes alongside Tyler Delabatouche in Bristol. That should be an interesting one. I mean, Solway with Marr and Hepburn is not. That's not a bad combo. That's really not a bad combo at all. Like, is it as good as those ones? I'm not sure. I don't think. It remains to be seen. Callum Hepburn's now had a year to adjust to the national division. How does he press on from a player development perspective? I don't know. If he does sign anywhere, like I said, I can only see him going to Swindon in this league. Russ Kelly replacement. I mean, he can't play centre as in that sense, though, can he? I thought Warren, for me, I've only ever really seen him on the wing, but Warren will get stuck in, like Cowley will. If you don't play Blore, we'll have him back, Chris Gasby. Shout out Chris Gasby as well for the Junior Showcase weekend. I'm surprised he has any voice left. Watched Joe Warren play for our Div 2 side with Mason Lipsey, and he was really good, but I can't see him at Swindon full time as a Cowley replacement, potentially on a two-way with both Swindon sides, maybe. I don't know. I'm keeping my eyes on Rutkiss as a Cowley replacement now he's in the National League. Bring him home. Bristol import netminder. I don't think they will. There's been some chatter they're getting a British netminder in, but again, nothing concrete. It's not the sort of thing I kind of stand on, to be honest. But no, I don't think Barry will go down. My understanding is that the Bristol are not going down an import netminder route. Voices Buggared. So it's just spelling. I 100% can't complain on the spelling front at all from my perspective. That's I will keep. You walked into that one, mate. Just seeing if there's any other news. Five have signed somebody. That's all well and good. Just seeing if there is any other news. Deacon Field is standing by a fjord in Norway. Not necessarily news per se. I probably would kind of say kind of an open door. Anything anybody else wants to talk about? GB actually we'll talk about very, very briefly. Obviously relegated from the top tier of the IHF World Championships, and didn't play well enough. Got relegated. That's hockey. I think again the national it's a permanent frustration where people are sort of surprised. We send a team of grinders and one really good natural goal scorer, like one high level, elite level goal scorer to a World Championships, and we're surprised when we struggle to score. Like, we've got a lot of grit, we got a lot of heart. Like, you cannot fault the players that go out there, but it feels like we need more variety to our roster, particularly up front. Like, at the back, I think, we've got some good puck movement, we've got some good transition, we've got some good creativity. Like, obviously Ben O'Connor is not getting any younger, but there's some bits and pieces there. But we've got a generation's worth of players who grind out results, and actually you need top end skill. You need guys who can do those skill bits. The thing that irked me, and people will say this, people will complain about me for this, and I just don't care. Every other team registered players into this. Kieran Brown can't go. Why did we not have Kieran Brown? Why? Why not get him in? Why not get through some of these younger guys in? This golden generation is not going to hang around forever, everybody. We need to bring guys through. I'm delighted Sean Norris got some time. He's obviously signed for Guildford today. Not a massive surprise. He gets to come back home. It's the best elite league option for him in terms of being close to his family. So, yeah, why not on that front? But yeah, I think from a GB perspective, for me, we need to start looking at being more than just a team that guts out results and is plucky. There is a sea change we need to make in our mentality. We need to start getting in guys who do different jobs. Got to do different things. We can't just keep naturalising every Canadian that comes along with a British passport. We've got too much quality sitting in the national leagues and coming through to not have something done with it. I think there's the problem there, and it's the long-standing problem. The other issue, of course, is you get British hockey onto an international stage, and we just don't seem to adapt to IHF level officiating. The silly penalties at silly times in crucial moments for GB were killers as well. I didn't know by that, but some really good things out of that too. Jackson Whistle, I thought played really, really well. I thought Ben O'Connor still looks at that international level, still looks really, really solid. Kirk looks like he's never been away. Looks like he is still absolutely top draw. And like I say, they put a shift in. Can't fault the effort. I think the execution. I think there's some reasonable criticisms that can be made of that in terms of how, from a longer term approach, we kind of figure out what we're doing going forward. All things considered. Key thing from Milton Keynes is, will they go import D or not? Interesting question there. I mean, Tim Wallace will. I venture it's more of an option issue than it's been in previous. A mindset of development needs to change in UK hockey. Find a balance between getting a W and playing youngsters. This greatly improve the league and Team GB in the future. We might have to go down the Denmark route and just take it on the chin for a couple of years of just, it's time to bring in the next generation and accept that we need to, for a year or four, it might be 1A and 1B, whilst these younger guys get through and get more ice time and get better and get more ice time and get better. And look at Denmark now. Denmark were awful in one of the games I watched them, and then switched on and they were great. Kaidi, Oxford fan, who's obviously probably in very good spirits tonight about their new coach announcement. Prague was fun though, great atmosphere because of course she went out there. Glad she enjoyed herself. We won't say she was a bad omen for GB losing at all. Thoughts on Kirk's move to Eisbären Berlin? I really like it. Aside from the fact the Eisbären Berlin are my favourite team in the DEL, it's really, really savvy from Kirk. A lot of people have sort of said it's a some people said it was a downgrade from the Czech Extraliga. Some people said it was an upgrade. Some people said it was a sideways step. What this is two things for me, and I've said it before, and I'll say it again here. It's a stylistic improvement for Kirk because the DEL is a much more North American playing style league in Europe than the Extraliga or the Finnish Liga that he's played in before. The other thing as well is that for a guy who wants to get himself, who's had NHL eyes on him, and that fell away. He is now playing for a team, and he's also got a 2-year contract in Berlin as well. Let's keep that in mind for a team that is the multi-time, 10 DEL titles. He has literally joined the best organisation in the country, but it's also an organisation owned by AEG. Who owns AEG? Who do AEG own? Sorry, they own the Los Angeles Kings, and there are elements of hockey operations interoperations between the Eisbären Berlin and the Kings organisation. So that's Ontario, that's LA as well. Now let's be honest here, the chances of Liam Kirk going straight from the DEL to the NHL are low, but this could be Kirk's potential for finding a way back into North American hockey, because that could go from Berlin to Ontario to Los Angeles. There is a way to do this for him, and it's a really, really savvy move. He gets to play with some really excellent players though in a really excellent league. Jake Hildebrand has been a fantastic netminder. Ty Ronning up front again this year for Eisbären Berlin. Marcel Nobles, Tiffels. Like, Kirk is going into a stacked roster of talent. And I'm fascinated to see how they use him. To be perfectly honest, it's going to be a lot of fun. Talk of a second Scottish team in the NHL, not heard much lately. I've heard very little of that. Drop EIHL import numbers to start. That's a given there, Mike. I don't think most people. I know some people will say, it's around entertainment. It's just like enjoy your complete desire to not stare at the bigger picture of the sport and the country at all. I was there for their 1 win. You were there for their 1 win as well, Kaidi. Yes, you were. I can't. We can't deny that one, if nothing else. Just having a squiz. Do we have any other news working its way through? No other big news. Nothing else I can see. Like I say, fascinated to see what Oxford do, what Mark Saunders does with Oxford. Let's have a quick squiz at this press release as well, actually, because I've not actually read this yet. Is there anything particularly huge in there about this? We want to get younger, faster, and blood through the Oxford junior system players. I'm very much looking forward to working with stellar coaches the club already has. The club has a fantastic setup in management and off-ice staff, as well as some of the most passionate fans around the league. I'm really looking forward to putting together a product they can be proud of and will cheer us on during 24-25. When we get started in September, I look forward to seeing you all very soon. I'm fascinated to see what Mark can do. Mark is generally quite a good coach of younger players as well. So on the Rangers, I think they find a way. If nothing else, Matt Rempe with the Stanley Cup is going to be hilarious. He's 100% dropping it. Or he'll punch it. No, jokes aside. No, I think New York. I think Shesterkin. If the winner for me comes out of the East though, because either Shesterkin or Bobrovsky are both of them are locked in. Whichever one comes out of that for me is going to be the one who does it. For Canada, you'd like McDavid to win it. I don't care. I'm sorry, I don't care about Dallas. Jason Robertson's talented, but I just don't care. But for me, like I say, I think my head to me says New York. I think we get New York, Oilers, and New York wins in 6. There you go. There's a prediction. Any more for any more? Because we're just over the. We're obviously just over the hour and 10-minute mark. But yeah, chuck in some last bits then, folks. Let's see what we can have a talk about. I'm just looking at a message that I've had here. Yeah, we go. Yes, working the phones. I'm not trying to be Fabrizio Romano or anything like that, but I do pick up a bit of information because it does make kind of talking about bits and pieces easier as a result. No other news I can see in the immediacy. Where do we think Henry Adams will end up? I'll pull one out of left field here for Henry Adams. Solihull. I have nothing to say that that's happening at all. That's my guess. Solihull. Dogs. Would be a surprise for him, I suppose, wouldn't it? Yeah. In which case then, last call, everybody. Last call. We'll head out in a couple of minutes then if we've kind of covered all the big news. So going forward, news coming soon about a project that I'm going to be working on over the summer. It's going to take me at least another week or so to kind of get things bashed into place. However, there is going to be something happening, and we will need you to be spreading the word about it when it comes. But interested to see where it goes. Just something I kind of want to work on. Like I say, I'm trying to can't afford to be all-encompassing. It doesn't really work if we do that. So, you don't want to spoil team signings. This is the thing as well, is you don't, from a perspective of someone who kind of tries to work within that space, if you piss off the teams, you don't get anywhere. Football, less of a faff. Because there's enough information and enough people are interested. If you spoil things in hockey, people get cross. And it's hard on that front. But I also try to kind of work with teams then on, if I know this information, if you want to do, you can do your bit, but let me do my bit and let me get some depth for the people coming behind, kind of thing. So it's hard to say, but certainly for me, I don't necessarily want to be kind of like a transfer rumours person. The bigger stories that are of the bigger interest, things that I've done in the past, like Spordle, like guys getting paid, like stuff like that. That's kind of where I let's point towards the things that kind of need us all sort of point, who signs where, that will all come out in the wash. Most of your teams have got their rosters signed. Spoiler alert, they just haven't announced it yet. I think for British hockey, which needs to kind of really kind of panel beat out some of the issues that it has, I think there's more value for me and what I do to kind of, like I say, for a couple of things, which is one, humanise the people that we see and that we speak to kind of get that kind of bit of depth, get past the fluffy press release bits and pieces and see the human beings that run the sport that we enjoy, but also to kind of say this is good or this is bad, and kind of do that in a controlled way that we can, people can consume and enjoy, because obviously I want, I write and I enjoy people reading my writing, but I also enjoy the writing aspect as well, to kind of take a thing and analyse it and twist it around and say, here's a thing to read, but also as well because actually sometimes the emperor has no clothes, and somebody has to say it out loud that the emperor has no clothes, and it might as well be me, because I love the sport too much to not criticise it when it needs criticising. And I would much rather lose opportunities from bits and pieces by saying the thing that needs saying than nodding my head and nodding along and just saying yes to things. Don't get me wrong, there are opportunities I want in this sport, and there are times where where I may well have already jeopardised something because I've opened my mouth and said I don't agree with this. But there's a difference between getting opportunities by nodding along, and I'd much rather get my opportunities by being respected within the space for shooting straight. And that's why I built up the reputation that I have, because I may not, it's not high production value, it's not super flashy, but I am substance over style, and I always will be, because I'd much rather be doing my show here at BOTW Towers with my bits and pieces. I don't need a green screen, because we're here to chat hockey. That's what we want to do, and the best way for me to do that, I think, for me to be authentic to who I am, is to be rough, to be raw. I am a punk rock kid who's, yes, I'm nearly 40 years old, but I'm a punk rock kid. It's DIY ethic. It's raw, it's in your face, and it's how it comes. People don't talk about hockey in flashy TV studios in this country. So me doing that, for me, just doesn't make sense. So, Fabrizio Romano, maybe Mac can do it, in that sense. Let's just quickly respond to that. Like I say, last call then, folks. Jason Silverthorne, not a clue. Hopefully he can come back, but it wouldn't surprise me if he didn't. I'll shame him for this because he's just sent me this message. But Fabrizio Tassadri, who's heavily involved in hockey in Chelmsford, and nothing wrong with being a Fabrizio, we have the knowledge. I don't need the knowledge, thank you very much. I don't want to drive a London cab. Right, I think that's probably time, ladies and gentlemen. We will call it there. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, your number one source for all things related to the National Ice Hockey League structure here in Great Britain. Check out all the bits and pieces from the past season over on the website, as well as our most recent Hockey Stories piece, our long-form content series that goes from the 19th century to the present day, behind the Iron Curtain, into World War II and beyond. You can check out our latest piece, which of course was Either Side of the Great Divide, our in-depth look at the NHL Division 1 Championship game with some in-depth thoughts from both Streatham and Billingham as well. You can check out other bits and pieces from Hockey Stories, like my interview with Tom Norton when that came out. We've got interviews with the great movers and shakers of British hockey from across the last year. You've got tons of stuff. Dice Hockey that you can download, our free to download tabletop ice hockey game that's there on the website. The old BOTW podcast, all of that is there on the website. Bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, facebook.com/bannersonthewall. If you like bits and pieces for your Facebook feed, that's the way to do that. Hit the like button over there and join in the fun. Twitter, X, whatever we're calling it, is @BannersOTW. That's the best place to keep up with me and my rolling monologue about hockey as well. I do like to kind of get involved with people, have a chat about bits and pieces. Always entertaining. And sometimes you get a few bits and pieces that don't make it onto the website, onto the Twitter account as well. That's @BannersOTW. And of course, there's the virtual busking hat over at buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. If you enjoy what you see, help keep the lights on, help keep the wheels spinning around. It's always massively appreciated when people donate to that. Do appreciate that. That's buymeacoffee.com/BOTW. But of course, the joy is that this is YouTube. All of those social media links are down there in the description. And of course, we're on YouTube. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like the videos, share the videos, hit the notification bell as well so you'll get notified whenever a new video comes out. Because, of course, it's not just the streams that we do here. Video recorded interviews with plenty of people, interviews with folk, like I said, like Steve Nell, Steve Bangle that I interviewed last summer as well. Lovely chat. Tom Norton, Will Weldon, Graham Bauer from the Bees, Matty Davis from Hull. Need to have another sit down with him at some stage as well. Have another look at how the Seahawks have kind of progressed over the last year. Many more to come besides that here on the YouTube channel. And of course, like I say, we'll be back. At the end of June. But of course, during the season, Wednesday nights, 8 p.m, the BOTW What's Current stream, the best and number one live show for all things related to the NIHL. Like I say, we will be back in a month. So the last Wednesday of June is the plan. The last Wednesday of every month is going to be the idea for our off-season special. So this is May special, so June's will be at the end of June. But of course, you can keep up with bits and pieces. If some big news happens, like potentially when we see what permutations come out in Romford, we might do a bonus stream kind of thing like that. But as a minimum, you're going to get one stream a month through the off-season, and then when we get into the season, we'll get back to our weekly routine of kind of rolling through bits and pieces, and that's what we'd like to do. But there we are. A lot kind of talked about, a lot we didn't get to kind of talk about, because obviously the rosters are taking shape, and as things get closer to the season, we'll kind of start looking, certainly from a national division perspective, we'll look a bit more in-depth at some of those rosters. But what is going to happen? Who will be the next person to hop on board with Shark Time? Who is going to be the starting netminder in Bristol? Who is the latest Berkshire Bee? Will Swindon sign somebody new that isn't Ed Bradley? Who's the next person joining Telford? What will Milton Keynes do? Where is the next big thing? What is the new era like for Oxford? Will the Cardiff Canucks make the start line? What is this Swindon Division 1 side going to look like? Do the D-side Dragons and the D-side Ducks have something up their sleeve? Can Billingham repeat in the north? Can the Buccaneers make a bigger push in the league, or will Telford Tigers 2 repeat? All these are all questions that are months in the making, and we will be ready, and we will here for you through the summer as we come back at the end of June, July, and August to have a look at how things are going as we head back towards the 24-25 season. Thank you as always for coming along for the ride. Be happy, and if you can't be happy, then whenever you are, please do whatever you can to please be safe. As my friend Scotty Watts would say, take care of yourself and somebody else. For bannersonthewall.wordpress.com, this is Anthony Russell saying stay safe. And so long till next time. What is in the air for Romford, we wonder? Whatever's happening there, Raiders fans, you're in my thoughts. Let's hope it gets sorted out soon. See you in a month.